Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming in on this gorgeous afternoon in Storm Lake to join us for the next part of our Choose Blue Day, which is the expert panel part of things. And I am your moderator. My name is Dr. Andrea France. I'm a digital media professor here, and I'm very honored to serve as the person who gets to kind of field a lot of the questions and introduce you to our three experts today. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to briefly sort of explain our format. Each of our panelists will offer a 10 to 15-minute presentation that is based on his own unique experience and expertise in the field. And that will be laying the groundwork, I hope, for our conversation this afternoon. And we do aim to make this a conversation. We're a small crowd this afternoon, but I hope a mighty one in terms of our willingness to ask questions and to actually have a conversation about the issues related to autism. So please don't hesitate to step forward when we are finished with our presentations. You'll note that there is a microphone down here in the front, and it's my hope that you all can join us and ask the questions that you have in your minds. We also wanted to make sure that this presentation today was accessible to everyone, and so I don't know if there is anyone here at the moment from the Spanish-speaking community who would like to have any translation, but we did have volunteers who are up in the balcony and willing to do some translation throughout this process. So if that actually happens, please understand if there's some low talking up there, that's not rudeness, that's just advancing this to everyone. So. And now I would like to introduce you to our three esteemed panelists. I'm going to begin with Dr. Luke Tsai, who is immediately to my left. He will be our first presenter, and he will be talking about the issues of changes in autism diagnosis and how to access services. Dr. Tsai received his medical degree from Taipei Medical University in Taiwan and completed his residency and training in general psychiatry and fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry at the University of Iowa Hospitals. So he's got some Iowa in his blood. He held academic and professional appointments at the University of Iowa College of Medicine, the University of Kansas School of Medicine, the University of Michigan Medical School, and Oakland University School of Education and Human Services. Dr. Tsai is a scholar, a researcher, a teacher, a father of a young man with autism, and a friend of individuals with autism and related disorders. He has received many awards and honors for his work with individuals with neuropsychiatric disorders, including the President's Award from the Autism Society of Michigan. Dr. Tsai has been selected by his professional peers as one of the best doctors in America, and his publications include more than 93 articles and 46 books or chapters. Dr. Tsai is the author of the books Taking the Mystery Out of Medication in Autism, Asperger's Syndromes, and Raising Our Son with Autism, A Family's 40-Year Journey. Next, seated in the middle, is Gregory L. Kenyon. He'll be our second speaker today, and he'll offer insights on the issue of services for adults on the spectrum, special education, and trust accounts. Mr. Kenyon is a shareholder in the firm Bradshaw, Fowler, Proctor, and Fairgrave. He is engaged in the general practice of law with emphasis on estate planning, wills, probate, trust, and elder law. Mr. Kenyon received a bachelor's degree from Buena Vista College in 1975 and a Juris Doctor degree from Drake University in 1978. Mr. Kenyon has served as chair of the Iowa Bar Association probate section in 1996 to 97, 2000 to 2001, and 2001 to 2002. He is currently serving as chair of the Iowa Bar Association Elder Law section. Greg is serving on the Iowa Supreme Court Guardianship and Conservatorship Reform Task Force. He is the fellow of the American College of Trust and Estate Counsel and a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. He is a frequent speaker at the Bar Association and professional continuing education programs on elder law, Title 19, which is Medicaid issues, guardian and conservatorship issues, estate planning, and probate matters. Our final speaker today will be Senator Darrell Beal. He will be addressing how we approach legislative change. Senator Beal earned his Bachelor of Arts degree also from Buena Vista University and his Master of Public Administration degree from Drake University. He was elected to the Iowa Senate in 2002 and re-elected in 2006 and 2010. He was defeated in his 2014 re-election campaign, largely due to reapportionment. Senator Beal has a proven track record of community service and legislation leadership and accomplishment. He has championed the causes of autism, veterans' rights, mental health, education reform, safe schools, renewable energy, including wind power, biodiesel, and ethanol, lakes and rivers restoration, skilled jobs creation and training, regional economic development, accessible, excuse me, and affordable health care, keeping children safe from predators and families protected from domestic violence. He was often called Iowa's ambassador because of his extensive international relations and citizen diplomacy activities. Senator Beal has garnered a number of prestigious awards during his 3 terms in the Iowa Senate, including the Herbert Hoover Uncommon Public Service Award, the Robert D. Ray Service Award from the Iowa Sister States, Martin Luther King Community Service Award, and Kids' Choice Lifetime Achievement Advocate Award, among many others. All of that, and he told me that he would be just fine if I introduced him simply as Drew's grandpa. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. Our first presenter today will be Dr. Tsai.
If you don't mind, I'd like to stand up and talk. I don't know how to talk when I'm sitting down. So it's truly an honor and a pleasure to come back to Iowa, and particularly to this town. I have never been here, even though I live in Iowa City for 11 years. But love to see your lake. But anyway, they only give me 10, 15 minutes to give you some information here, so I have to learn how to talk fast and then use slides to help. And I won't be able to give you details of all the information, but your handout should have more information included in the slides. So after the talk, if you still have a question, you can always go back to your slides, to the handout, so that you can get more in-depth information. So here, really, I want to begin to talk about the evolution of the diagnosis of autism. And quickly, you will find out that for many, many years, until about 1980, it really depends on who was the expert in the field, and then decided what should be the term to describe a group of people. They have a special kind of a unique features. So you can see different kind of a name being given until 1980. Then the organization, which is American Psychiatry Association, and start to say, this is our job. We will tell you what the autism is all about, and we're going to give you rules to help you how to make diagnosis of autism. So again, you can see all the changes. And till 1994, not too long ago, concept of several different subtypes under autism, and that's been practiced for many years until 2013. Another group of experts in the field, they decided that really should use a different kind of definition and diagnostic procedures to determine who would qualify for autism. So basically, it's really, in the field, there are 2 opposite groups of people. They don't like each other, and they fight with each other. They always think that I'm smarter than you are, so they have a different idea, and then whenever they get the power, then they would change whatever is already in there. So it's basically a group of, we call them as a splitter, which is they believe there's a subtypes within autism, and versus the other group, we call them as lumpers. They like to lump everything together as one big group. So every 10, 15 years, you're going to have changes, and depends on who is in power. And this 10 years or this 3 years for, or maybe next 10 years, the lumpers is in power. So my bet will be 10, 15 years from now, the splitters will come back. And then there will be, again, the idea of subgroups under so-called spectrum. So that's the way the field has been doing for the last 50 years or maybe 40 years. So we really have not done a very good job, and we cause all kinds of confusions, and that's why we always argue with each other. But in a way, maybe that's nice. It's good for people in the field, which means we're always going to have jobs, and we can always argue with other people. You know? So, but that's the way it is. And the idea for the DSM-5 is that the group, the committee members believe with a new idea, with the new rules, we can get more people qualified for autism so that we can provide service to them, which is a good idea in a way. But unfortunately, they didn't really study good enough. And then after that, we have many people went back and then try to review and try to compare between DSM-4 and DSM-5, the two systems. And then overall, you will find out average about 27% of people, they would qualify for DSM-4 diagnosis of, today we use the term spectrum. Back then, it's a pervasive developmental disorder. And 27% of them, if you apply DSM-5 system or rules, then they will lose the qualification. They won't get the diagnosis. So that's about the numbers you can expect. And then there's a review of a 14 study in 2014, again shows that there's a wide range from about 7% to 60% of people. If you use DSM-4, they will qualify for autism, but then if you use DSM-5, they will not qualify for autism. So those are the people who will miss the cut. And you will see that most of them will be the one based on DSM-4 would be, they would qualify for PTD-NOS, or they will qualify for Asperger disorder. And these are the two subgroups of people. Many of them will miss the cut. And then the autistic disorder, still about 20% of them, even they would qualify for DSM-4, but will not qualify for DSM-5. So once they miss the cut, then there are going to be problems in terms of getting services. So here, with all the information, the review articles, we have some idea at this point. If we continue use DSM-5 rules, we are going to have about 1/3 of people, they used to qualify for DSM-4 diagnosis, will no longer qualify for DSM-5 autism diagnosis. So now you look at the agencies, they of course want to decide which system they want to use. And for the agencies, they control fundings. Nowadays, since they themselves also have problems with funding, so they want to have a system that will only qualify fewer people so they don't have to give out more money. So that would be the government agencies prefer to use DSM-5 system. And they would demand that all the people used to get the diagnosis based on DSM-4 now may require to re-evaluate them and then hope about 1/3 of them will no longer qualify for that. Or for the new cases, they wanted all the agencies involved in diagnosing this individual use the DSM-5 so that they would not qualify as many people. On the other hand, agencies like yours, like those Autism Society and some other clinics or hospitals, they like to help people, and they would prefer to use DSM-4. And there's good news and bad news here. Again, I just mentioned about the really based on funding, then you can tell who would want to use which diagnostic system. And now the good news in a way, it's a good news in DSM-5. There's a problem there, is that they did not specifically say how many out of the A category would be required to qualify a person with autistic diagnosis. So it's, for whatever reason, we still don't quite understand, but the final publication leave it that way. So then you have a clinician basically will say, well, then I can really decide, how many items I want to use, even though some people, maybe the committee member will say, no, you have to require all the 3 items. But since it does not specifically or clearly say that, so then if you want to help, then there's a one way to really say, I only based on 1 items and doesn't require all 3 items, then you will be able to qualify more people for the diagnosis. So that's one way to really to help the situation. And then the other one is, again, at the last minute, we again don't really understand why, and then because maybe many people complain about the DSM-5 system is going to make many people would not qualify for the diagnosis. So someone put this note in there and then say, if these people qualify for DSM-4 diagnosis of a PDD, now they can also qualify for DSM-5, good. So we have people, they know all the details, would be able to point you to all the loopholes here, or maybe the good news here, but there are many clinicians out there, they don't really understand the whole details of the systems here. They may not understand here. So my suggestion here is really that if this is just to say the mild degree a group of people would miss the cut. And then if you are the parents or the caregiver, and if you have your cases of your children would not qualify for DSM-5 for autism or for the spectrum, you can always ask the clinician to read the rule again and say, there's a note to say that my child used to qualify for DSM-4 PDD diagnosis and should also now be recognized as qualified for DSM-5. So you as a parent, as a caregiver, if you know all these details, and then you can convince the clinicians to use the new rules. And then for the clinician, the diagnostician, if you're already in the position, you can help people to get the diagnosis, then you can always go back to the DSM-4. You don't have to stick with the DSM-5 to make the diagnosis. So if you know what's going on, then you can also help the other clinician to learn about the good point people can use for DSM-5. So even DSM-5, when you first look at that, seem to have all kind of problem, but as long as you know what are the rules we can still use to qualify people for autism, then we should always go there. So that's the reason why I feel it's important to take this opportunity to share with you. And this is all so-called legal and acceptable practice. So I'll stop here.
Good afternoon. My name's Greg Kenyon. I've got some printed text that I put together and they put it on the table. And as I was listening to the stories and the music before I spoke, I'm going to deviate a little bit from the printed material, so if you'll give me that license. First, I really want to thank all of you for coming today, and I thank the university and Marie for inviting me to participate. As one of our speakers said during the stories, the teacher, Ms. Friedman, I believe, she gained and learned more from the children than she could have ever given back. And I feel that way about what I've gained already this afternoon. I hope I can hold up my end of the bargain. I graduated from BV a little over 40 years ago, and I know what you're thinking when you say that. You see, you certainly look young for being that old. And I appreciate those murmurs, even if they weren't real and honest. But I did wear my blue and gold tie to honor my university for my graduation. I went to law school after I finished up here at BV for a couple of reasons. Like a lot of people at that age, I wasn't quite sure what I'd do with my life, but I did know that I wanted to help people, and I found through the work that I do, the planning work and helping people in these different times, that I'm able to do that, and it's been very rewarding. I was struck by a comment from the young lady who talked about how we just want the same opportunities as others. And there's a poem that I've heard a few times in the last few months. It's from Maya Angelou, and I'm not going to try and read the whole thing, but there's a couple of verses that I thought were particularly appropriate. She says, "In minor ways we differ, in major we're the same. I note the obvious differences between each sort and type, but we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. We are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike." And we are. Despite what some of the national discussion would be, or other discussion for that matter, we're all really the same people with minor differences. One of the great benefits of my work is getting to meet families and learning their stories, much as we did this afternoon. One of the things that I have really learned, and it's hard to encapsulate, but I think you heard some of this today, the families have universally showed me and taught me a great deal about compassion, persistence, creativity as they go through these things. They're the heroes to me. So here I am. I was sitting here thinking of this. I'm sitting in a chapel on a Sunday afternoon. My church has been going through a lectionary series where we based it on Latin phrase ubi caritas, which I'm probably not pronouncing correctly. But loosely translated, it means that where there's love and charity, God is there. So, those were the unprepared remarks. And so I'm going to turn to what you wanted to hear this lawyer come and talk about, so I'll deviate back to that. There are two major concerns that I usually confront with when we start to talk to families about this. One is that there's a financial question, and dovetailed in with that a lot of times is a capacity issue. And the capacity issue takes lots of different forms. Sometimes it's a physical capacity issue, sometimes it's a cognitive ability. We're doing better at finding definitions and diagnosis of the cognitive abilities that people have. We had a seminal case in the state of Iowa, it's now almost 20 years old, where the Supreme Court said that we should only interfere in somebody's life if we really need to, and only to the limited extent that we need to. So a limited intervention is what the court would prefer. What I think of in this area is if someone needs assistance, we talk about them as substitute decision makers. And a substitute decision maker takes different forms. The simplest one most of us are familiar with is a power of attorney, either a financial power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney or both. And the person that serves under that is called an agent. In some instances, if your family member, loved one has some level of capacity, he or she can sign a document and designate someone to do the things he or she can't do. I think of this as puzzle pieces trying to fit together, that the individual has certain skills and abilities but may not have them all. We don't do a great job as lawyers trying to fit these together, but we're trying to get educated so we have better information to do that sort of thing. So you have powers of attorney, which is one level. On a financial level, we sometimes will create a trust. And in some instances, if a person just doesn't have any capacity to designate someone, it's necessary to appoint a guardian who makes health care and life decisions, where does a person live, that sort of thing. And also a conservator. and the conservator manages funds. So we're trying to piece those things together to come up with the least intrusive alternative to help the person maintain their maximum, obtain their maximum potential and their independence. And so the goal is very much the same. And the task force I've recently had the great pleasure to work on as we're examining guardian conservatorship laws in the state of Iowa is that refrain is echoed again and again, that we want to help people get their freedom. We don't want the court interfering unless they have to, but when needed, we want the court to be there to supervise it and help do the right thing. On the financial eligibility, most of you are aware of this in one realm or another, but some of the programs that your family member may be involved in or a friend are financially needs-based, and some of them are not based on financial need. The ones that are financially needs-based, we're pretty much familiar with Medicaid or Social Security supplemental income. Those two have very, very similar tests for eligibility. Minimal amount of assets a person can own to be eligible and somewhat of a minimum amount of income. There are categories of things that are considered non-countable resources or exempt resources, and that's where an awful lot of the planning comes in. You might be planning for a family member and you would create a trust for them. That trust is not going to count if it's been properly drafted and administered. If the individual comes into some money when they're already on benefits, there's some planning alternatives that are available. There are special needs trusts. There's a device called a Miller Trust. Recently, Congress and then the state of Iowa passed the legislation on the ABLE accounts. All of these are good tools. The question always is, which is the best fit for the circumstance? The key thing I always tell people as we start trying to plan is that we need to know the program that is involved or programs. People will come to me and say, I'm on Social Security benefits, help me plan. Some Social Security benefits are not tied to financial need, and we have all kinds of freedom then in terms of how we might plan for them. If the person is on SSI, the supplemental Social Security income, we have to be much more careful and deal with it like we would a Medicaid case and plan it appropriately. Part of what we know, and whether it comes from medical evaluations or just the observations of family members, is that circumstances change. Both the financial abilities because of inheritance or a lawsuit, or the abilities of the individual, as well as the cognitive aspects will change over time, either for the positive or sometimes for the negative. So you have to be aware of those things. And so from a legal perspective, help get yourself informed about the programs that are involved. Work closely with your medical staff to learn about the diagnosis and what the abilities are of your family member or loved one that you're working with so that you can help them going forward. I will stop at that point.
Senator Beal.
Thank you. First of all, the legislative process, notwithstanding all the lip service paid to long-term comprehensive, is inherently piecemeal and incremental. I'm here to talk today, as I had mentioned, my preference for introducing me was just as Drew's grandpa. Drew is an identical twin, and he, at 18 months, he could count to 20 frontwards and backwards. He read license plates, and at 18 months, he knew that a 9 inverted was a 6. Very bright little guy, and very articulate. And then about 18 months, my daughter they're an Air Force family, and they were stationed at Eielson Air Force Base in Fairbanks, Alaska. And I went to the BX, and Drew and his twin brother, identical twin brother, I bought Drew a helicopter, a little toy helicopter, and I bought Jace a jet. And Scott, my son, said, "Look, Dad," he was about 18 months. Drew is not playing with the helicopter. He was kind of following the circular motion and not really playing, but he was engaged. Not too long after that, Drew started self-stemming, and he just shut down his communications. I have to say this, Drew could not have been born into a better home. Scott, my son, worked one-on-one with a young autistic man, and Scott is a special education teacher in the Des Moines school system. Kim worked at a group home, the Homestead, which works with a lot of young children living with autism. And Drew also had a built-in control group. His identical twin brother, his clone, Jace. And so, you know, things that might have been not so noticeable had it only been a one child, when you had another child just like him that was developing more normally, it makes the comparison much more apparent. Well, I learned as much as I could about autism. Scott and I served on the Early Access Council, and I learned a lot about ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. And I sponsored Senate File 1, which I dubbed Drew's Bill. I'm a Democrat, but I learned very early, when I was in the minority, as a matter of fact, and as a freshman, by working with the majority party, you could get things done. I had a constituent that was called up for active duty in the National Guard, and he was not allowed to get out of his lease, and he was going to be penalized. And I said, that's not fair. And I went to Don Redfern, a Republican who chaired the then Governmental Affairs State Government Committee. I said, Don, this is, he said, Darrell, you're absolutely right. Why don't you? I learned that as a freshman in the minority, I got a bill passed simply by working across party lines. And so with that in mind, although the Democrats were in the majority at that time, I had two Republican co-sponsors, and we passed Drew's bill, Senate File 1, I think it was like 45 to 4, 43 to, I think it was 45 or 46, actually. And it died in the House. It passed overwhelmingly with bipartisan support in the Senate, but died in the House. Dave Heaton, the Republican Health and Human Services chair, says, Darrell, I know what you're trying to do. I support it, but I can't sell a mandate to my caucus. The insurance lobby in Iowa is very powerful. So I come back to piecemeal and incremental. What we did, I could see that we weren't going to get Senate File 1 passed. And sometimes better to have part of a loaf than nothing. And so one way that we got something on the books was to make what I was proposing available to the children of state employees. They were already on the state insurance, and so, okay, we'll get that done. It sounds elitist. And I caught hell, frankly, even though Drew has never benefited from Drew's bill. Some people, even advocates for autism, felt that I was doing kind of something sneaky or elitist. Why? And I agree. Why should it only be available to children of state employees? I wanted it to be applicable to all children, but we weren't able to get that done. In retrospect, getting it just for state employees was maybe kind of a blessing. Number one, it demonstrated the efficacy of ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. Secondly, it didn't break the bank. The cost came in much lower than what was anticipated. So we went at it again. It didn't get the number Senate File 1, but I still called it Drew's bill. We tried it again with the same bipartisan support, and it passed the Iowa Senate again, 46 to 3 or something like that. Again, it died in the House. Well, I was, as was noted, I involuntarily retired from the Senate in 2014. I say involuntarily because it wasn't my idea. But I feel a little bit like Moses because the legislature did pass it. We had an advocate in the House this time I think the dad or a grandpa of a child with autism. And it makes all the difference in the world, frankly, if you have a strong advocate. Why do I feel like Moses? Well, I led him through the wilderness, but I didn't make it to the promised land. I am pleased, however, because a lot of kids living with autism will be helped with this. My presentation today was largely on public policy and how to affect public policy, and I'm going to finish with, in a minute, of kind of a how to lobby your legislator. But I want to take a minute away from public policy making and how to impact public policy to something that was in the news today that just really saddened me. It was in the news this week, I should say. Did you see that? A boy with autism, 10 years old, was handcuffed at his school, arrested. And a boy who had never spent a night away from home was put in a detention home that night. He was telling the police, he had been a BD student like 6 months earlier and had gotten in trouble with another student for acting out. I didn't know you arrested and pressed charges against a 10-year-old child. And like many children living with autism, they don't want to be touched. That really sets them off. And here he's not only being touched, but he's being handcuffed. He was held overnight in a detention center. I'll tell you, if that doesn't make you angry, I don't know what would. And so I'm going a little bit beyond my prepared remarks on public policy, affecting public policy. We have an education need here as well. We have an awareness issue as well. So we cannot tolerate locking kids with autism, 10-year-olds, handcuffing them and hauling them off from their school. Legislators deal with dollars, numbers, enrollments, percentages. Friends, that's not what it's all about. It's about people. And those people have names, they have faces. I usually kept pictures of 3 or 4 kids. One of them is my grandson, Drew. I had one of a brain injury, one that had cerebral palsy. Literally putting a face on the issue. I'm taken to mean that we should figuratively put a name on the issue, but I think in my case, I wanted that literal face on the issue. This is why I'm sitting in the Senate chair. And there's a practical reason for that as well. As I said, it's not about those numbers and dollars, it's about people. And it's very difficult for a legislator who's dealing with numbers and percents to realize that he or she is also dealing with people's lives. And those people have names. And they have faces. It's a heck of a lot harder to say no to a person that is there. And we saw earlier today a number of self-advocates. And so that is really so important that, yes, we advocate as grandpas and moms and dads and teachers, but as much as possible for people with mental illness, with brain injury. I always attended those, and I spoke at most of those meetings. ID Action is one of them. You mentioned basically the Olmstead decision, the least restrictive, most appropriate. That is a guiding light. But I would like for you to pick up a copy of I entitled it, Put a Face on the Issue. And I'd like to you can take a copy with you, but I would like to indulge you in just a few highlights. First of all, legislators work for you. You're their boss. And the best way to advocate for your cause is to meet with your legislator face to face. Representative Lisa Heddens and I developed this. It was on ICN and different things, and it's basically how to lobby your legislator, and that was the genesis of what I'm saying today. First of all, prepare your message. When you meet with your legislator, identify yourself. I am your constituent. Define and frame the issue. Put it in real terms and personalize it. Mr. Senator, Mr. Representative, this is how this bill affects me. Be positive. I was mentioning earlier that we heard about patience, perseverance, what were those three? 3 or 4 P's. I love alliterations. I have some of my own. Positive, personal, passionate, and persuasive. But go armed with the facts. Legislators always appreciate a solution. Here's a possible solution, a remedy, as well as the problem. But outline to your legislator what needs to happen and why. It's helpful to obviously research your issue and even put together a fact sheet with your name and contact information so the legislator can get back to you. Oftentimes, a legislator, they don't have a staff, and so oftentimes they will assign it to someone. And so the more information you can give them, because it's probably going to be seen by eyes other than that of your legislator. Express exactly what you want your legislator to do. Why is this important to you? Do a little background work. Who are your legislators? You have 2. You have a state representative and you have a state senator. Find out what committees they serve on. What are their backgrounds? Look for personal connections. Find out from your legislator what is the best way to communicate with her or him. Email, telephone. I have to warn you that legislators, I would receive as many as 800 emails in one day. And you have to be very careful because a lot of them they sent, now it's so easy to send to 150 legislators. They weren't talking to me individually. Probably my biggest duty was to find out, is this one of my constituents? If it was from a veteran or if it was something like autism, I considered everyone in the state of Iowa my constituents. But most legislators don't really pay too much attention to constituents in some other part of the state. And so it's important on your subject line, if you put, hey, Mrs. Senator, it's me, your constituent from Storm Lake, and to kind of make it personal so they can readily see. Again, most legislators, as I said, don't pay too much attention, frankly, to communications from non-constituents. Again, face-to-face is the best way. Legislative forums. Sometimes community colleges, our Chamber of Commerce, sometimes the League of Women Voters sponsor legislative forums like once a month when the legislature is in session. Participate in these. Invite them to your college campus or your office, your service club, and invite them to talk to you. Make it as easy as possible to facilitate the dialogue. As I said, leave a sheet behind with your contact information and so the legislator can get back in touch with you. Stay in touch and remember to put your face on this issue. The legislature just adjourned yesterday. And so those legislators are going to be back in their home districts. Usually they return Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now they're here for good. So you have abundant opportunities to seek them out. As I said, try to remain positive. Don't make threatening comments. Most legislators, that's probably the easiest way to disengage yourself from what it is you're trying to cover. I would sometimes hear, we're watching you, or you do this, or we're going to defeat you in the next election. My wife learned a long time ago, if I was about to take out the garbage, the worst thing for her to say was to take out the garbage. It ain't going to get done. I'm kind of stubborn that way. And so legislators are kind of that way too, remain positive. I would encourage people to avoid chanting and singing or name calling in the rotunda, with one exception. If it's trying to get public attention and coverage, exposing an issue, then that is fine to gather in the rotunda. But if you're talking about trying to persuade one of your two legislators, probably not the most effective. I would encourage you to avoid form letters, postcards that you merely sign, not terribly effective. Legislators, if you go to the Capitol, this is kind of after the fact now because they won't meet again until January, but when you go to the Capitol, it's a very effective way of meeting with them. But know that legislators, basically that desk they sit on, 50 of them in the Senate and 100 in the House, that's pretty much their office. And so they oftentimes are unavailable because they're in a committee meeting, and a caucus meeting, or debate. Respect their time. But it's fine, it's okay to send a note in, and most legislators will come out into the rotunda and meet with their constituents. Again, be sure and leave contact information. But it's important to stay in touch with your legislators on matters of importance to you. If they don't hear from you, they pretty much assume that everything is okay. So I think it's important that you stay in touch, frame the issue, and literally and figuratively speaking, put a face on the issue.
We're now to the segment that opens this up for conversation. And so I'd very much like to encourage anyone who has a question to come forward. And there's a mic down here if you'd like to come forward and ask a question of the panel. I see some movement. And if you would, just introduce yourself to the panel to get us started, and we'll go from there.
Most people know me as your husband.
That's true.
Mike France. I'm curious about diagnosis. It seems like it's an imperfect situation, of course. Should parents of children who suspect their child might be on the spectrum go repeatedly back to same or different physicians until they get the answer they're seeking? How persistent does one have to be?
It's a very difficult, question is that really should begin with who do you go to? Okay. And then unfortunately, many people, they really don't have good training in this particular field. So honestly, many times you would be the person or the people to teach them, the professionals, to learn about how to do this. Honestly, if you go to, for example, pediatricians or family doctors, and I've been in 3 different medical schools, so I knew how they train pediatricians, how they train family doctors in terms of recognizing autism and how to help them. Very limited. So a lot of them kind of just go by, oh, we heard from this, we heard from that. So it's, again, why it's so important, you should be the one know more about the rules and all the policies and all that, and then show them. And once you show them, most of them, they are humble people. They would, want to study and then would go along with what you have in mind and try to get the best result. And I don't know whether I have answered your questions.
It's helpful. Thank you very much.
So what you're saying, Dr. Tsai, is that it's really incumbent upon the parents to self-educate in order to self-advocate with the physicians.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Well, that's interesting. Great. Anyone else? Yes.
I have questions for each of you, so I'll start with just you and then maybe let President Moore ask a question, then I can come back in. My first one is related to diagnosis, and I actually have two questions related to diagnosis. The first is, I'm Karen Strohmeyer. I'm a professor of special education here at BVU. And so oftentimes, particularly in rural schools, we find that teachers, or parents, pardon me, of children who come from low income or near the poverty or below the poverty line, often their children don't get diagnosed young because the parents don't know what signs and symptoms to look for. They don't have that education, and our school systems still aren't to the point where a general education teacher can recognize it. Oftentimes, someone who's higher functioning on the spectrum may not even exhibit a lot of symptoms early on, and they might just say, oh, it's just developmental. So even our kindergarten, first grade teachers aren't seeing it. So what kind of information do our physicians need to be getting out to parents, and our teachers need to be providing to parents, kind of those developmental milestones, so that they can catch this earlier when we're working with often a population of parents who may not be as well educated as our middle income and higher income families?
I guess a quick answer would be, you shouldn't really go to physicians' clinic for diagnosis, unfortunately, because most physicians, again, they don't have adequate training in this field. And then they don't give you a whole lot of time to really give them all the informations. Okay. So when I taught my students, I even criticized our own system. I say many times parents came to our clinic and report problems in school. And then we got the secondhand information based on parents' report. And then it's kind of very surprisingly that physicians just accept that as accurate information and then jump to the conclusions. Okay, so again, you need to go to, I still believe, school education system, their clinic, evaluation clinic, will be more knowledgeable than physician's clinic. So the best advice would be really, you hope you can work closely with the school system, because after physician's evaluation, still the student or the patient will go back to school to work with the school system every day. So here, you hope the education, the teachers, the specialists in school system would have enough knowledge and experience. They really should be the best resource to go for the diagnosis.
Right, so the difficulty is schools under IDEA don't have authorization to make a diagnosis. Now they can. Iowa is a non-labeling state, so we don't categorize a child as autistic, we just categorize them as an eligible individual. So they'll get the services regardless of the symptoms that they have. But often those insurance options that they have available, particularly military families, being eligible for ECHO, and all of those community and school-based services that fall into place, our low-income families don't have the resources to go out and see a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist who may do that DSM, and the school is hesitant to refer and specifically say things like, you have characteristics of autism, because then they get bundled up in the paying process for the diagnosis. So a lot of times it's just saying, I see some symptoms that your child exhibits that might have some underlying characteristics of other things that a physician could help you out with. So I'd like you to talk to them about these specific things that your child is doing. And it takes a long time to train a special educator to recognize those symptoms, and we often don't get them until they're in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade because of those developmental issues. The other question I had for you was, with the new diagnosis, a lot of our Asperger's kids are now going to probably fall under the social pragmatic language or communication disorder instead. So do we need to now adjust and start speaking to our legislators about including that in our services for autism? Are we risking another group of our kids falling out of being eligible for a lot of insurance services because before they fell under the umbrella of autism? New diagnoses, they may get a diagnosis of social or pragmatic communication disorder. Oh, that's kind of like Asperger's. So the parent goes home thinking, my kid has Asperger's, and then they apply to their insurance and they say, well, that label doesn't qualify for the same things as Asperger's.
This social communication new category, unfortunately, again, it was put together at the last minute without really any good data to support the validity of that diagnosis. And then even there's really no data to show how to really help that population, because it's a brand new diagnosis. So there's no data whatsoever to say what you need to do to help that population. So if you give that particular diagnosis, you send them back to school, you send them to any place, no one really knows how to deal with that population, okay? So of course, when you talk to the behavior therapist, they always argue, we really don't care about the diagnosis. We only look at the problems, the behavior. If truly they can tell, that's really a behavior problem, that's fine. They can do the best they can to help them to modify their behavior. But the problem here, again, earlier I said don't go to physician's clinic, but sometimes you still have to go back to psychiatrist or pediatrician's clinic, because there are some medical disorders, their symptoms would present very much like a psychotic behavior or the psychiatric behavior. One example would be like a tic disorder. Tic disorder, if you don't recognize that, and then you say it's a behavior problem, when they make noise, and then when they show faces and all that, and then you don't use medication is the best treatment for those type of symptoms or disorders. So if you miss that diagnosis, again, we are not doing the good service to that particular patients. So you got to have a special clinic, or you just wish you have people specialized in this field in your area can really guide you where to go. And still, I talked to someone earlier. I was in Iowa City 40 years ago, start to talk about autism. And then today I'm still hearing about maybe the same problems I encountered back 40 years ago. I'm very disappointed and sad about how slow the progress is about. So here again, within the field, we have not really do a good job and keep throwing you the new categories without any really good data there.
Those new categories risk new kids with disabilities, losing services. The school will serve them regardless because we're serving them based on their characteristics. But their eligibility for medical coverage, it's something that under DSM-4, had they been diagnosed a year earlier, they could qualify for these autism insurances. Now that they've got this diagnosis, they're no longer going to qualify, and the insurance field has to catch up with a new diagnosis created in the DSM-5 because there's not that communication between the agencies as they're developing these things, so that the legislature has to then play catch-up afterwards because they don't see these things coming down the pipe until they're done. So we have to have some kind of system where we have communications between our physicians and our legislatures so they know what's coming, and we don't have these loopholes or these places where our kids fall through the cracks, because eventually they're going to leave me in the school, and those same services, those same opportunities aren't going to be available because they're not protected by their health insurance.
So it's important, the professional in the psychiatry field, in the educational field, can work together with legislature so we really understand who really need help. But that would take a lot of cooperation and understand what are the problems first. And again, use the tips I give to you. Many of those cases, for those people, they like to use a new system. It's a very interesting kind of observation over the years. There are always people want to be the first one in the community, do this and do that, not really knowing, what's wrong with the new system. And so they just want to jump as a first person. And many of those people, they disqualify them and put them over to the communication disorder. They can qualify under the PDD-NOS. So you can say, go back to the DSM-4 and then give them that qualification. First, PDD-NOS, and then pull out the DSM-5 and say, here is ASD, because the books say you can do this. So you got to know the rules they play, and then you will be able to win the game.
Thanks to all three of you. comments. My question is regulatory in nature, so it may be best posed to Greg, I don't know. But could any of you, or would any of you like to comment on the rule that was promulgated by HHS in 2014 that essentially moves everybody into community-based group homes by 2019, and how that may or may not work in the case of someone with challenging behaviors who's forced into a group home situation with small staffs and the implications for serving that individual?
I can take the first crack at it and then see if my colleagues want to weigh in. I think it does a disservice, a great disservice to the individual, because there are people that the group home is just not the appropriate setting. There's an apparent tendency. It's easy to criticize the legislators when you haven't been in the trenches, and the senator's been there, and I've done my share of lobbying on behalf of the Bar Association, and I know how hard they try to get it right, and sometimes you're getting a little bit of the bread instead of the whole loaf of bread, as you mentioned. There's a tendency to lump people together, as you mentioned your diagnosis, and say, this will work. We'll put them in the group home and this will work, and it's the least expensive alternative that's available for the government to do that. I don't think it's consistent with that, the Olmstead case which was referred to, which is intended to try and help the individuals get the help they need. And if there's not a setting in a particular state or location, you can go elsewhere to get it. But it's problematic, and it's right now, I would say, is that we have a consistent, apparent lack of education or understanding across the state. As all of you know, we've cut back on mental health treatment issues, which this is not mental health. We know that it's developmental, but they get grouped together. And as those services go away and facilities are closed, there's less care and professional services for those people that do need it. And it was unfortunately consistent with the problem that we were seeing in the conservatorship and guardianship arena when we were evaluating it. There are a lot of things that we would really like to see done from the court's perspective that are going to be really very expensive, and so we're going to have to figure out how to best package those going forward. So it's not a complete answer to your question, President Moore, but it's probably the best I can give you right now. Maybe Senator.
I may have more of an observation, Fred, than an answer. I don't know how that gels with the so-called Olmstead decision, most appropriate, least restrictive. I'm not sure it's capturing the essence of that decision, of what you described, kind of a one-size-fits-all. And something else that's at work here, Doctor, you kind of addressed it, but coming back to ABA, which probably is the best initial thing we can do for young people. It doesn't work with everybody, but it's probably early detection and help. But one of the problems I encountered was the insurance people were saying, this isn't a health issue. This is ABA, applied behavioral. That's educational. That doesn't fit into your health plan. But of course the educators doing their best are saying, well, it goes beyond what we can teach. And so there's a lot of finger pointing. No, you do it. No, you do it. And consequently, nothing gets done. And in Iowa, you're going to Florida because I understand one of the major reasons is that Stephen is eligible for more coverage there. The privatization of Medicaid in Iowa is going to just be we're already seeing what a disaster that is. That health providers are not getting paid, and people in need of services are not getting served. And and in this political climate, as I said, I like to do things in a bipartisan. In this highly partisan, both in Des Moines and Washington, compromise has become a pejorative term, and you're selling out, and so it makes things really, really rigid. And so I don't know. You've posed a question, and there are other similar questions that, and then okay, I'll be off my roll in just a second, Fred. The other thing that really compounds all of this is the obscene role money plays in politics. Since the Citizens United case, we used to know who was buying influence and access and perhaps influence. Now, heck, we don't even know, all these different groups, and, I don't equate political speech, the more you spend, as being protected by the First Amendment. But that really comprehends rational people sitting down and trying to solve the problem. I'm sorry, I'm a lot more sad and discouraged probably than I am normally optimistic and hopeful.
No, go ahead, Karen.
Just to conserve time, so the direct question to you, Senator, and I'll try and do it following your guidelines. So my name again, Karen Strohmeyer, and I am one of your constituents when it comes to the topic of autism specifically. The issue that I'd like to talk to you about is, first off, ABA, phenomenal with kids with autism spectrum disorders. We've had great success with it in schools, but it requires a certain level of training. Briefly, shout outs to President Moore. He endowed money to our special education department. 10 students in special education this summer will be attending a 4-day training on ABA instruction. And that endowment is helping to send 10 of our students who couldn't afford to go and get that training on their own. So they're going to go into classrooms knowing how to set up those classrooms in a structured way for success of students with autism. But the problem we have is 1 in 3 positions in special education remain unfilled or filled by somebody who is not licensed in rural schools. That's 1 in 10 in our urban schools in Iowa. So we need to do something to fix this problem in special education. This isn't new. This has been since 1974. Since IDEA was first enacted, we've not been able to fill special education positions. Our kids with autism spectrum disorders are often the kids with the most significant needs, and their shortages are even higher. Most of our rural schools do not have a licensed teacher equipped or licensed in that area. They have a license in mild to moderate needs, and then they take 1 class on how to give assessments. Some of the things that we need in Iowa to fix this is our Department of Education does not have a director of special education. So our issues are not being heard on a larger level. When our rural teachers get professional development, that comes from the AEA. That's done on a vote measure. So if I'm one special educator in a rural school of 25 general educators, how often do you think special educators get professional development? Not very often. We just finished a study here at BVU and looked at the burnout rates of rural special educators in Iowa, and it's pretty high. Most of our teachers are lasting 3 to 5 years before they leave the profession. So we need to, 1, get a director of special education that can really deal with the issues that our special educators are facing and address particularly the shortages that we're experiencing across Iowa and in rural schools. In addition to that, we need to pass some legislation that requires some better licensure models. We put through a bill last year to try and create a statewide program that would better educate our teachers. Most universities only offer an endorsement in special education, which means their teachers are getting a degree in a general education area, and then they're adding somewhere from 12 to 18 credit hours of other courses that license them as a specialist in special education. Our students here complete over 100 hours. We have a special education major. They complete over 100 hours in special education, and they spend over 200 hours in the field before they ever go to student teach. And the feedback we get is that they know how to meet the students' needs. We tried to put this through the legislature, and it got nowhere. It basically was tabled. So we need to address those shortages, and then we need to look at ways to build incentives so that we can recruit and then train and retain teachers who are prepared for this field that requires a certain level of aggressiveness by special educators, because our kids are already behind. We can't coddle them and move slowly with them. We need to work hard. We need to apply things like ABA therapy that can help those kids experience success in their lives. So what I'm asking maybe is some ongoing communication and ways to get more involved. Our students go up to the legislature twice a year to talk to their legislators. They also have gone and spoken at BOEE and Department of Education. And we also set appointments with our legislators here. But getting some action from the Education Committee has been very, very difficult. And I think it starts with, we need to have a voice in the Department of Education.
Actually, I want to get back to you. That was passionate and very persuasive. And I think the legislature needs to hear you. And I think you could, I'll help you. They don't listen to me. I mean, I'm in the minority now. But you need to be heard before both the House and the Senate Education Committees. I mean, this is something, the legislature can fix that. I think the governor technically could fix that problem if he wanted to. Let me ask you, are you a member of a professional association?
Council for Exceptional Children and the Rural Association of Special Educators.
Do you have a lobbyist, either part-time or that would help? There is strength in numbers. Right. And something else that I'm such an advocate of ABA, but I found that there aren't that many. Morningside now has a program, and Drake is I think they're launching a program for ABA. And so that would fill part of your need. But I was, rural Iowa, I chaired the Veterans Affairs Committee, and psychiatrists are in such short supply, especially in rural Iowa, and therefore mental health is in short supply. I worked with the Psychiatric Society on veterans issues and autism and so forth, but I really upset them when I sponsored legislation to allow an advanced degree nurse practitioner, an ANPR with a psychiatric endorsement. This is where it went wrong, as the physician of the day for involuntary committals. And they said that's outside their scope of practice. And I kind of rhetorically asked, well, we don't have psychiatrists. Get out of the Iowa City, Waterloo, Cedar Rapids area, or Des Moines. We don't have psychiatrists in rural Iowa. I'd obviously much prefer to have psychiatrists. I understand we have a physician, a BV graduate that's coming back as a graduate of medical school and coming back to Storm Lake and practice. That we need a lot more of that. But basically, they didn't. It was a rhetorical question. But basically, they were saying, yeah, that an ARNP with a psychiatric endorsement, that's outside their scope of practice. I guess rather have no mental health care than entrusting it to an ARNP. So rural Iowa, rural is two things that are happening. Storm Lake may be an exception, but two things are happening in Iowa, two demographic factors that really spell disaster. One is we're an aging part of the state, and secondly, we're a declining part of the state. As I said, the Storm Lake doesn't fit that norm, but I guess I would work, I would like to share with you maybe how you can be heard before the education committees in both the House and the Senate, and in even probably not only the policy but education approps subcommittee as well. So
that would be great. One of the things that I talked to my students about, we kind of have a checklist too. We did the training with Autism Speaks on how to advocate when you go to the state. Right. But I always tell them, when you go as a teacher, because a lot of our teachers don't know how to advocate for themselves, and after the whole collective bargaining thing, they're a little nervous about it. But I always tell them, if you can, a lot like you said, have a story, bring a parent with you who can tell their story, bring a picture with you, and even better yet, if you've taken the time to train a child on self-advocacy, bring the child with you.
Are you familiar with ID Action?
ID Action? No.
That is a group of self-advocates, and it really does provide that face that I was talking about to the issue.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time. In fact, we are out of time. This has been a great conversation, and I'm kind of hoping that maybe some of you will stick around, and hopefully, if there were some questions that weren't asked, I know Allie was interested in asking a question. You can catch our panelists as we are disbanding and talk to them privately. I want to thank our panelists for their incredible insights and expertise today. I'd also like to thank Marie Sennett for putting this together and for all of the volunteers who were associated with Choose Blue. I do want to point out that none of our experts today were, they did this volunteer, they came here, they didn't want any money for this, and for that we are really grateful for all that they have done to offer us new insights into all of this. So thank you all for being here this afternoon, and thank you for your insights. Have a great evening.
When the lights go out, but here we are, standing. Our wings will never melt, the darkness can't destroy them, and if they did,